first of all, Tara Lipinski, thank you so much for joining me to talk about your lengthy infertility journey. For those who maybe aren't caught up in the 5 years that it has taken for you to get to where you are today, a brief synopsis of when you and your husband first started trying and really the journey to now.
We started about 5 years ago and we weren't actively trying, but we just decided between both of us getting a little bit older and our jobs that we were going to go through IVF to, get insurance of some embryos so we could, potentially build the family that we have dreamt of over the years. And again, preface that with, we're very lucky that we were able to even take that step of starting IVF. But when we started it, we then for the next 5 years hit almost every roadblock and obstacle there is in this infertility IVF world. And I went through, I was under anesthesia 24 times. I had 6 failed miscarriages, 4 DNCs, 8 retrievals. And then I have endometriosis, which was diagnosed. So I had 2 major surgeries with that. And then we moved on to surrogacy once we found out that my husband and I have, reproductive immunology incompatibility, which was probably the reason all of these miscarriages kept happening and why we couldn't keep these pregnancies going. So we moved on to surrogacy and now we have a beautiful baby girl, Georgie Winter, that we just welcomed. It's only been a few weeks, so we're really over the moon and so in love.
Take me through that mindset of yours where you had spent 5 years trying to get to this end goal and now you're here. Expectation wise, emotionally, is it where you thought it would be? Did you even let yourself imagine this though for so long?
So you stop imagining what it will be like. I think in the beginning of our journey, I was still so naive and still, we think of names and we think of, what baby showers would be like and what you would buy for the baby and all of these moments. And what's interesting is, we experienced so much loss. And for me, I personally have gone, I think, through a lot of trauma that's given me some PTSD to deal with. Through that process, it's been hard for us to kind of think ahead. So during the pregnancy, we just really stayed focused on week to week. That was my thing. Let's make it to that next milestone, one more week in the books. And then it was funny at the hospital, we were like, oh, wow, we're really not prepared. We haven't thought about anything other than a name, which happened very late too. But we weren't very prepared for what parenthood would look like. And so now, we're just kind of winging it, but hopefully in a really good way and enjoying every moment. And it feels very surreal because I didn't think about it that much because I thought maybe it wasn't going to happen. That now it's very strange to have a real live baby in my arms. It almost doesn't feel real. I just wake up and, just like can't believe this is happening.
It's so special that you get to finally experience this side of it. And I know for both you and Todd, you had such different experiences along the way. This was clearly happening in your body for so long. You held on to a lot of guilt. And I think men just process it differently because of a multitude of reasons.
Right.
But how did you lean on each other and even individually find the strength to keep going? Because with what you went through time and time again, I think anyone would look at that and say, how did she keep going? How did they keep doing it?
Well, I think for us, it was a lot of trial and error. We had to experience it and then learn from our mistakes of how we both processed emotions, loss, grief, and just truthfully, just the day-to-day life of IVF differently. And that took a little while. We call it our hiccups and our bumps in the road, where we just finally realized, okay, this is not going to be an easy journey and we have to be on the same page. And maybe even if we're not on the same page, we have to learn how to support each other and give each other what that person needs. because it will be impossible to get through if you don't, especially when it's a long journey, and we call ourselves long haulers. You know, it was a 5-year journey. So I think over time we bonded and we became closer and stronger from all of the trials and obstacles that we were facing. And I think also because we became so isolated, we had each other to, we really only understood what we were going through, we felt, at many times, because, you know, friends and family see it, but they're not living it day to day like we were. So I feel like that then created a really strong bond for us as well. But, you know, moving now into parenthood, we both say we really hope that we maybe got a little jump start where we've really learned how to get through some of the ways that I think you have to support one another as partners when you are A, experiencing infertility, or B, have a child in the home. And there's so many different parenting styles. There's so many different anxieties that people have. And I'm definitely more on the anxious side. So through infertility, he had to really take a step back and support me, because it was hard. It was happening to me. It was every day. I had so much on my plate, whether it was just the physical day to day, the shots, the ordering of medications, and also then physically going through what it's like to experience miscarriage and loss, and what happens to your body from that, emotionally, psychologically. There's just so many different aspects of infertility and then of miscarriage and loss. So I think, you know, for me, I just had to, I think I leaned a little bit on my skating career and looked back at who I was as an athlete. But the crazy thing about that is, as an athlete, you just force things. You work harder, you practice harder. And I realized very early on that you can't do that when it comes to a medical issue or infertility. So I had to learn acceptance. I had to learn patience. I had to learn all these things that, you know, I don't love doing to give up that control. But I do think that the one part of me that always stayed was just the urge to keep going. So every time I felt that I was done, and I would say it for, you know, a couple weeks after these losses, I just say, I'm done. I cannot do it. I cannot go back and do this again. And then there would just be one morning I'd wake up and be like, all right, put me in, coach, like I'll try again. So that's just sort of how I dealt with it. But I don't think there's any advice or any real way to navigate something, you know, as difficult as pregnancy loss or IVF or infertility.
I'm always curious when people choose to share, if they choose to share their whole story, a part of their story, a snippet of their story. You waited to do the podcast. Were you already pregnant with your surrogate by the time, or no?
No, we started this podcast after my last miscarriage. And, you know, obviously not a lot of people, you know, other than close friends and family, knew that we were doing this. And I think I just was at the point where there was, you know, so many years of secrecy, in a way, of me living this separate life that I wasn't truly open about. Obviously, like I said, my close friends and family knew, but it just got to the point where it was like I couldn't ignore that this has happened to us, and that I felt so strongly about wanting to connect to this community. You know, I had a secret Instagram account where I would, you know, follow so many people in the IVF and infertility world, and I felt connected to them, and I felt validated, and I felt that my feelings were seen and heard through their stories. And I just felt, Tara, if you are brave enough at some point in the journey to share your story, then maybe you can create that little community for yourself and make other people that are going through this not feel so alone. Because my acupuncturist had me write in a journal one day, and it was one of the entries where I was like, one day I hope that I'm brave enough to share this story, because I don't think brave is actually the right word, because I don't think anyone has to share this story. You know, I think that for me, I had to protect my heart by not sharing it for so long. And I think that's good advice for so many people. If you're out there going through infertility, don't feel that you have to tell everyone your story, because sometimes you just really have to put the blinders on, and you only have so much energy to get through your days to to hopefully achieve this goal. And it's you protecting your mental health and your emotions. So for me, though, I got to a point at 4 years in where I just was over it all, to be honest. And I was like, okay, Todd, let's just see what happens. Let's do a podcast. Let's tell our story. Let's document this. And maybe it's just even healing for the two of us to have these conversations. And that's really what happened. So after the the fourth miscarriage, we started the process of thinking about, the podcast, laying it out. And then we started filming. We would stop if things, were just difficult, or I just felt like, I cannot talk about this today. But then we eventually kept going, and our surrogate got pregnant, and then we had to catch up a little bit, and we kept filming up until at the 13th episode was about, a week or so before Georgie came. So it's been a wild ride.
And I was going to ask, but you kind of answered it, like, did you discover new things about each other through the podcast, and did it help you heal? Because I think from, in my perspective, my husband and I, we shared some things, but I realized once we would talk to another couple going through infertility, he would share something different. I'm like, oh, I didn't know you felt that way.
Exactly. I mean, in a way, I thought we've been through so much. What is there that I'm going to find out about Todd's emotions or his feelings and it was mind blowing. It was really, this podcast was so much obviously about connecting with so many women and couples going through IVF or infertility, but I realized it became so much of a place where we'd sit on these two couches and, strengthen and bond through our experiences. And I found so many things he said, so interesting, because I was like, oh, at the time, I didn't know you were feeling that. And I was feeling this. And, it's just interesting to also reflect back, after some time has passed, and look how we lived our life, or how we were able to, support each other and really go back and talk about those times. And it's been special for the two of us to do that together.
I think it's so cool that you have that now. I mean, so much of this, I think we almost black out of our memory, especially now having a baby. It's like, you don't have energy to remember. And so
right.
It's not only a way that so many other people can relate, but then for you, it's a little chapter book of, of all the things you went through, which is pretty special.
And I think when you're going through it, you're feeling all of these emotions, they're right, right underneath your skin, where I didn't want to lose. That's why we started filming the podcast when we did, because I didn't want to lose that, if we did move on and go a different chapter, whether it was a good ending or a bad ending, I wanted to try to stay as present as I could, so that people who are actually going through similar things could have their feelings validated. Because for so long I thought, Tara, are you too much? Are you too worried? Are you, why is this affecting you so much? You just don't have that, that community that talks about it as much as they should. There's still so much stigma around this that you can't really understand your own feelings sometimes. So for me, even doing this podcast, I'll get messages, and I love connecting, in the podcast, I'm like, oh, DM me, which is crazy, because now I'm also so OCD about things. I'm like, there are so many messages that I need to remember to get to. But connecting with this community, because I feel like my feelings are validated. Oh, when they tell me I'm nodding along with what you're saying, I felt that too. It feels very healing for me as well.
Yeah. And I can also appreciate the male perspective on it. I think Todd does such a great job of like asking you questions that are going to get a reaction from you, but then he'll also tell his side, which I think from a female perspective, I'm like, it's so nice to hear from the dude. It's nice to hear what he has to say.
And I think it's so nice. And I think, the messages I get where women will say, oh my goodness, I'm listening with my partner, or I'm listening with my husband, and it's changing the way that we are, approaching our IVF life or infertility life. Because I think for Todd, and this is when you're not actually doing the treatments day in and day out, you're not the one experiencing the hormones or the loss or going through a miscarriage or going through a D&C. There's two very different experiences. And I think he felt so alone too. But over time and with reflection, he realized and really understood what it's like to be the person actually having to physically put their body through these cycles and, pregnancies or pregnancy, loss. But so I really do enjoy when I get a comment from a husband or from a partner where they say, oh, this made me think, or like, oh, I'm gonna rethink how I do this tomorrow. And I'm like, yes, for the person that's like going to that appointment.
Totally. Yes. I know there were a couple of things that you said in one of the later podcasts, and I just want to address it because I think that this is such a validating feeling for women. But going through this journey where you're on one side of things for so long, and then you get to the other side, you mentioned that you felt guilt and you got emotional when you were talking about that, almost as if you didn't want to be happy because you're so concerned about the people who still don't have what you know that you now have. So can you just talk about, even after the fact, that there's still so much that continues to be a part of this journey, and what you feel for others, because I know that's a big part of what you were trying to communicate.
Yeah. I think for people that have gone through infertility, it has lasting effects. And of course, I go to therapy. I, am healing from all of these years of, loss, but at the same time, it has changed me as a person. And I will never forget who I was for those 5 years. I was that person that would see people with happy endings sometimes. I go through a transfer and someone would get pregnant at the same time and I would have a pregnancy loss. And then I'd see 2 years later, they've moved on to their second child and I'm going through another pregnancy loss. And I know what it feels like to see someone succeed when you can't. And it's a hard feeling because you just think, like, why did infertility specifically choose me? Why can't we move on to this next phase? And I think for me, I remember that feeling. I remember that hurt. And I connect so deeply to people in this community that are in the wait, that it feels hard for me to tell someone, or I feel uncomfortable, or I feel guilt that we've actually moved on to this next phase of having a baby. And I'm trying to work through those feelings because I know that I'm so excited and that we deserve to, experience this happiness. But I can just say to all the women and couples out there, I see you. I know what those feelings were like. And, I think a part of me will always connect to the people that are in the wait, because that was a half decade for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Okay. So now here we are, surrogacy as a whole, and you don't have to get too deep into the woods, but just your overall experience, and still being able to now enjoy the incredible thing that is having your sweet little baby that is from you and Todd. I mean, just
Yes.
take me to that place you're in now.
So it's been incredible. I mean, when we started the surrogacy process, I didn't know how I would feel because I had tried so hard and for so long to carry a pregnancy myself, but I continued to experience loss. But what is incredible is, for someone who needs, thought that she needed so much control over a situation like pregnancy, I enjoyed the experience so much. And I think it's because pregnancy for me lost a little bit of its magic of what people enjoy about pregnancy. I wasn't enjoying any of those moments anymore after 4 losses, heartbeat scans and waking up and checking every symptom and just in my head all the time thinking I'm losing it again. I had so much trauma around pregnancy that I think I actually wish I moved to surrogacy way before I did, because I needed that. I needed to know that there was going to be someone who could finally bring our dream to life, because for so long it wasn't happening for us and we were just waiting and putting our life on hold. So it got to the point where I was just so thrilled that we could take our genetic embryos and, our bun, her oven, and give it to someone who was going to bring little Georgie here. And the fact that she's here is still mind blowing. It's just so surreal. But I loved every step of the way. And of course, I think so many people think of surrogacy and, oh, is there a lack of connection? What must that be like? And believe me, I understand that. That's what I thought when I started. But until you really go down that road, there is a bond and a connection that, for me, and that's just specifically me, I felt the nausea through my own pregnancies. I felt all these pregnancy connections and things, and it never resulted in a baby. So this type of connection of actually seeing a growing baby during a scan and getting good news was, the best gift that we could have ever got.
And I can imagine your surrogate will be in your lives for a very long time.
Yes. She is family. She is family. And we created such a special relationship and bond throughout this year. And it's weird afterwards. I even felt, I didn't even know I was going to feel it because obviously I wasn't the one pregnant. But when I got home, I had all these emotions because I originally thought, well, maybe it would, because there are things you can do for reproductive immunology mismatches like Todd and I have had, but I don't know if I want to go down and do any more treatment, to be honest. So, but in my mind, I thought, oh, I'm going to get home and maybe I'm going to feel the urge to now try. Instead, I was just crying because I was like, I miss Michaela and I's pregnancy. Like I miss our everyday, chats and the schedule. And it was so funny that I was missing pregnancy with Michaela when I thought I would be missing the pregnancy for myself. And instead Todd's like, this is what were we doing for 4 years? We should have done this right from the start.
Okay. So now with your sweet baby Georgie, what are you most excited for to live life with little Georgie, to have you and Todd now become this new partnership as parents, not just partners, but parents and partners? What are you looking forward to now that you are finally here and she's finally in your arms?
We're just excited about this next phase. We thought about it for so long. And for us, I think there's so much gratitude surrounding Georgie. That's just the emotion I feel most when I look at her, just so grateful that this happened. It just seems when it doesn't happen for so long, you just can't imagine it's real. So I think for us, we just are so excited to be in this next phase, to experience this part of life that we thought maybe we weren't going to get a chance at. And, I think for the two of us, there's everything we've gone through has really heightened all of the emotions. So the sleepless nights and, the crying baby, I am just like, oh my goodness, I've been waiting for this. I can't believe it's happening, so we're still in that phase where, just all of it, we're so grateful for. But I do want to say something again, I like feel it bubbling up, like this guilt of talking about these happy moments, especially when so many people are waiting. But I think there's also something else to be said about, yes, we're in this phase of life, but so many people go through infertility and IVF and they don't specifically have the traditional happy ending that you see in the news of, of a baby. And sometimes they have to move on because they want to, because they've felt that they've exhausted financially, physically, emotionally, psychologically, all of these aspects that are part of this journey where they, move on to a child-free life. And I think that for so many people going through that, I hope that they know that I know, and that so many people know that they haven't lost, or they haven't, they didn't get the happy ending. They have a happy ending and they have a beautiful life. And I get so many messages from women and couples that feel that when they see news like this, even though they've moved on to a different life that may not include a child, that they are still winning. They're still winning. And I just think there's so many people part of this community that, I hope to connect with more. And I hope that they they've liked the podcast, and I just feel so loved and supported by so many people now. It's crazy. I feel like I have millions of new friends through this.
Well, you really do. And I'm considering myself as one of those. Thank you so much, Tara. I'm just so grateful for your time and I'm so happy for your family.
Thank you so much. Thank
Yeah.
you.